Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to welcome you to the podcast, Odette.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm chuffed.
Oh, I'm so excited about this conversation. And after having you speak at one of my events for Love What You Do, I've had so much positive feedback about the beautiful and genuine information that you share and how open you are with really being able to support business owners to get their more eyes on their business through PR. And I think it's so important in this day and age, especially if you want to scale. So for all of those people who don't know who you are, who live under a rock, can you please share with everybody what it is that you do and tell us a little bit about Odette and Co?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. That's very kind of you. I loved talking to your community, and there were some really cool questions. And I personally gained so much from being part of that and hearing you talk about the imposter syndrome. And I've used that manifestation, and fingers and toes crossed, I'll tell you when it all comes to fruition. But basically, I'm a publicist and a PR mentor. I feel like everyone's a mentor or coach these days. And, you know, it's such a cool and fun place to work. I love publicity, and publicity is basically the act of increasing your brand visibility. And for PRs, that's through the medium of traditional and modern media. So anything from newspapers, television, you know, digital news outlets, podcasts, YouTube channels, influencers, all manner of distribution channels. But I really focus my energy on informing people about traditional media, because I think despite the fact that publicity is such an unknown hidden lever, it's actually super powerful because it helps transform trust and build equity in brands faster than anything that I've seen. Obviously, ads are super powerful, and an integrated strategy, I think, is, you know, where the money's at. But in terms of doing something that can really quickly set yourself apart from the pack, everyone knows you need to have a nice squeaky clean website, beautiful brand, and, you know, you need a social media strategy. What a lot of people don't know and understand is that publicity is the thing to sort of set yourself apart. So yeah, that's what I do for my bread and butter, and also for my shits and giggles. It's lots of fun.
That's awesome. Tell us, how did it all get started? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I moved to Byron Bay 5 years ago, as we were chatting before. We're both ex-Melbourneites and don't like the cold. So here we are moving to the northern sun. And I worked for Westpac in events and communications for 5 years. I worked for the Australian Physiotherapy Association in marketing and communications. And when I arrived up in Byron Bay, I tried to bring my work with me. I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed my team. I loved working in health, and it felt really good for the soul. But unfortunately, the organisation was probably a little bit backwards in coming forwards when it came to a remote workforce. So I got to work on a bit of project work for a little while. I worked for TAFE New South Wales up here in communications and PR, and they were going through a restructure, and I kind of got to this point where I was traveling down to Sydney all the time, or I was traveling around regional New South Wales. And I was like, this isn't really why I moved to Byron Bay for a slower lifestyle. So I decided to take the leap into running a business, not very intentionally at all. I really just put the word out that I was freelancing, and that really quickly snowballed into more work than I could handle. And then I reached out to my friends who were PRs, copywriters, social media managers, graphic designers, website developers, and very unintentionally found myself running an agency. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never worked on agency side of PR and comms. So it was a bit of a baptism by fire. And at the beginning of 2019, I decided to make a huge change and scaled everything back to me, and decided to start teaching people how to do PR. Because the biggest thing I'd found in my time running the agency was that the people that had the really good stories to tell, the ones who were like making transformative change, they often didn't have budget to spend on publicity, and PR's really expensive, but it's actually not rocket science. So it is something, it's a skill that people can learn, and particularly a skill that people who run businesses who are generally pretty quick on their feet, they're hustlers, they know their story, they know what the magic is within their business, and they generally have, half an eye for a little bit of how to write a savvy email. They kind of get the sales part of their business. So a lot of those skills are, the key traits of a good publicist. So for me, I could see that I could teach my friends who are small business owners how to navigate through. And I think my first client got something like first client that I did the mentoring with got something like 10 major pieces of coverage within her first campaign across, the Daily Telegraph, Vogue, Peppermint Magazine, all of these fantastic pieces of coverage. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a thing. So I started really fleshing out the program to make it a little bit more scalable. It's still super small. I only take classes with under 10 people in each class, so that everyone's got really close contact with getting guidance. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell these days.
I love that. And I love how you've just really weaved back to what's important to you, and you've created something that really lights you up by the sense that you're really tapping into those really cool stories. And it's not just about, scaling, or not just about growing a huge business. It's actually you went and you created something amazing, but then was like, hang on, what was the catalyst? Was it something that happened? Was it something that you found that just wasn't lighting you up anymore? Or was it that you didn't have contact with the people that you wanted to work with? Like, what happened?
Oh, I think it would be like best described as like a catatonic burnout and pressure from all sides of the fence. So at the point where I decided to make a big shift, I'd been sort of like cruising along, growing team, growing clients. And as you grow team, your overheads start increasing, the quality of team needs to be at like a higher price point of the sort of salaries that you're paying, and then you need to justify that with higher client retainers. So there was a lot of increasing building stresses in the business, and I think at the end of 2018, one of my team members was doing IVF as a single potential mama, and she was going through a really tough journey with that. Another one of my team members broke up with her partner of 7 years. Another one's mama got diagnosed with breast cancer, and there was a really deep heaviness in our team. And one thing that I couldn't separate from was that these people were experiencing monumental shifts in their world that were, deeply, deeply difficult. And for me, there was no line where you switch that off. There's just no way you can switch that off. And so from a business perspective, you're paying people whilst they're experiencing enormous trauma, and you still have client demands that have to be met. So for me, that was a really tough period that really stretched my, emotional bandwidth, my financial range, all of the things in business. And then in early 2019, there was a bit of a shift in the finance industry, where several of our clients were with the Royal Commission coming through. And with that had some pretty big impacts on my business. And I just got to a point where I was totally and utterly burned out. And I just made a choice to scale everything back. And when I say scale back, that's probably a bit more of a glamorous term than you would actually call it. If I had matches and fuel, I would have burned the place down. Honestly, I was so adrenally fatigued. I was exhausted. And I didn't know what I loved anymore. I didn't feel connected to my joy in my work. I didn't want to be a publicist. I felt dirty selling things and selling stories. And so I walked away from the business and spent some time keeping my head down very low. I reached out to all of my friends who in my little business community and said, who needs help in your business that is just physical labor? I don't want to think. I don't want to do anything that requires me to use the skill set that I monetize normally. And so I cleaned my friend's ceramic studio. I dipped glazes for mugs. I packaged online orders. I made dog food. I chopped up veggies. I cleaned the studios. And through that time, I found myself again. And it was, like, honestly, financially so hard through that period. I didn't ask for any money for that work. I just needed to keep busy and move and, you know, not have any other demands on myself. And I think for the first 2 weeks, I didn't talk at all. I just existed and just got shit done. And yeah, through that patch, I just started writing the idea of this program and what it might look like and what it might be. And I started like seeding that out, and I got heaps of interest in it, and the fire started coming back, the sparkle, and I could see how it could fill my cup and how it could serve the people that needed it, without it killing me in me being on that like massive growth journey that you've got to scale, you've got to grow, you've got to be bigger, or you've got to be bigger to be better. And instead I could just share what I really, really love and help transform some businesses that I worked with. So yeah, it's been a bit of a wild road.
Yeah, massive. And now with like hindsight of what's going on in the world right now, how do you see that as being a huge blessing?
Oh my gosh, so much. Honestly, as soon as the bushfires hit in November last year, I was like, holy heck, this is real bad, but I can deal with this. And then Corona hit and I was like, this is horrific, but I can deal with this. When Black Lives Matter started emerging, I didn't feel like I could deal with this anymore. Really. I just felt like shit, that I haven't done more, that I haven't been better. And I have been part of a system that's oppressed so many people. But the strength that I learned of myself through that reshaping, remolding, and going back to, you know, finding myself again, just taught me that it doesn't matter what happens. There's always a path forward. And you just have to trust in it.
Absolutely. And trust in yourself that you can get through it. Like just having that, being able to go back to the bare bones of it and walk away from something that could have been incredible, right? But it could have been completely out of alignment with what was really true to you and what was important to you. And then, like, I know that was like not a great experience for you to go through, but now I kind of feel like it's set up such strong resilience in you to get through anything.
Oh, totally. I know it's such a cliche, but I wouldn't change that because it allowed me the space to create what I've created, which is also a really resilient business to tough economic times. This is like, you know, that was the path that I needed to go on because, you know, previously like a high-end boutique PR agency is not super resilient to tough economic times. So I'm bloody grateful that I went through that journey so that I could be in a position now where I'm able to help people thrive.
Incredible. So good to hear. And yeah, like I just feel like we don't wish that upon anybody, but then being able to walk yourself through it and then get back to where you are now with something that your incredible business of Odette and Co is really thriving and getting such beautiful feedback, which by the looks of it really lights you up because you really speak about it from your true heart of, I really just want to help people tell their story, which is
yes. Yeah, it's so much fun. I feel very lucky.
Yeah. Incredible. Is there anything else that you learned about yourself over that journey or over your whole business journey?
Well, I think I probably, a couple of things, to be honest. I think I never would have thought of myself as a creative person, but I think as a business owner, you must be, because you're constantly problem solving, and that's our journey. But one thing that happened to me along my journey in life is that I think I never really believed in myself. I never really thought that any of the good things that came my way were really mine, that it was very much driven by luck, or, being surrounded, being in the right place, or, being a good talker, and that being, a good way in for a lot of success, which is amazing in PR, like the best thing in PR. But when my business was growing, and even working in my career, I was always surrounded by really talented people. And by virtue of that, I fell into the shadows of their talent. I always thought people were better. Well, the copywriters are better copywriters. And, the publicist over there is better than me. And, the editor's an editor. So they're like better at writing and they're better at editing. And so I was always around these people. And then when I grew my team in my business, I'd hire smarter copywriters than me. I would hire smarter publicists than me. I would hire smarter social media managers than me. And along that journey, I completely stopped believing that I could do the thing just as well as anyone else, because I could see how brilliant the people were around me. And the most beautiful thing that came out of rebuilding was seeing my magic and truly believing in that, and, seeing that I am a really freaking good PR and I get really amazing results for my clients. But moreover, I'm really good at teaching PR and igniting other people's fire and helping them secure their wins. So that, that's been a gift in itself, to see my own strength, which is not something I've probably always believed in.
And I would imagine that is the same for a lot of business owners that you work with. They really struggle to figure out their uniqueness and being able to tap into their own strength. And now having that skill yourself and seeing, what do you find that is big for them? Like being able to then help them uncover what their uniqueness is and allow them to own it. Do you find that that's a challenge for them, or is that something that you find that once they've found it, they lean into?
Yeah, look, I think it is a challenge for a lot of business owners, and that's probably why I was so curious to hear more from you about imposter syndrome, because I do think so many small business owners have that imposter syndrome, and it's fed by whatever different story. Everyone's got a different place where it's rooted in.
Especially if we're like I just want to kind of relay that back to the story that you just told, is that if we're always looking outside of ourselves and comparing ourselves to other people, then it will always feed back a story that we're not good enough, because we're looking at other people's strengths and not actually taking time to look at our own.
Yeah, totally. And I think you said that question in when you did the presentation about if this is true, how does it serve me, or something along those lines. And I just always come back to that now, and I'm just like, yeah, like, how does it serve me? Like, that's ridiculous. It's just so unbelievably unhelpful. And, the same is true when I talk with clients preparing for media interviews. Like, yeah, it's going to be scary, but like being afraid is not necessarily going to serve you, but feeling that energy of fear and converting that into an energy of excitement to drive you forward is really powerful. So, like reframing how we tell these stories about all of the things in our life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is really powerful. And I think that not every business is appropriate for PR. But I think a lot of businesses have some cool stories to tell, and often we make ourselves smaller instead of, celebrating the awesome stories we've got to tell.
And I think that also is fed by the tall poppy syndrome in Australia. Like, it's just, we don't want to put ourselves and put our hands up and be like, I'm amazing and you should see how amazing I am, because we fear being torn down, for sure. So I feel like that kind of plays in as well.
Yeah. And I think there's also some like ingrained messages in women that they need to be nice and they need to be polite, and they need to be small, and they need to not be, challenging the status quo or whatever it is, these sort of like internalized messages that people have that, being loud and proud of your success or sharing your story is not a bad thing. That's a message that we've inherited from the patriarchy, and we can smash the crap out of that one because, be proud, step forward into your light and celebrate your success, because it's very hard to succeed when you're always playing small.
And I love when you said, I think you said it about during one of your presentations around like, what is it that you disagree with? Because it kind of helps you uncover where you're different. I think that's a fear in itself. Like, I don't want to disagree with everybody. And yet that's what makes you uncover that true uniqueness, because there is something different about the way that you do things. And being able to uncover that through a question like that can be confronting.
Yeah, super confronting. Yeah. And, as humans are conditioned, or programmed that we are, community minded, we're collaborative, we want to like get in sync together, and we don't even think about it. We don't think about why we want to do that. We're drawn together to cooperate because that's how our species has survived. Like, we're working against some like pretty old programming.
Yeah, and it takes a bit to get through it, but it's absolutely worthwhile for sure. So tell us a little bit about some of the successes that you've had with Odette and Co.
Oh, wow. Well, I think my greatest success would be the friendships that I have built around this business of both clients and fellow business owners. Like, to me, that is just such an enormous success to have fellow publicists support in an industry that is renowned for not being supportive of one another, and having clients that go on to refer beautiful other clients, and that I get to spend, mornings walking the beach together or catching up with on the weekend to have chats with. But in terms of like, coverage that I'm really proud of, gosh, there's so many, but one that really stands out for me recently was Sophie Walker from Australian Birth Stories securing an opinion editorial in The Guardian. Now, The Guardian for me is the creme de la creme of media outlets. I think their integrity with journalism is second to none, and helping her to secure that pitch of her own doing was something that, gave me so much pride. I think Dale Larder from Noonie securing her own coverage with the Daily Telegraph and with Peppermint Magazine is pretty incredible. And even, a couple of weeks ago on our live call in the Hack Your Own PR program, Annabelle Bauer shared her story, her pitch with Georgia Doan, who's one of the field producers from the project. And she jumps on our live calls to share the behind the scenes of how the project brings their stories to life. And I think one of my proudest moments was like seeing how the community of people in the program rallied behind Annabelle when she shared her story. And there was all kinds of like DMs flying in the group chat. There was, just the way people come together and want to support one another. And for me, business can be like such a lonely journey in the shit show, in the fight that you're always up against. No matter how well you design your business around flow and have a healthy pipeline and all the good things happening, there's still a lot of deep stresses because everything that you do is reliant on your energy, your input, your success today is determined of your success tomorrow. So having a community built around you that like deeply believes in what you're doing and understands your journey, that is like complete fire for me. So seeing, the women in the program jump in and, support one another, that was pretty special. And also fingers crossed that story's going to run with the project.
Amazing. Amazing. That is awesome. And I totally agree. Like surrounding yourself with people who understand it, who get it, that are there to support you and to be there when, you know, you want to tear your hair out to the times you've got to bawl your eyes out.
Totally. I remember a feeling like a few years ago, I'd said to one of my friends, like, I am so lonely in this journey and I need a community around me, but I'm so fucking tired that I could never possibly set something up, like be the coordinator of a community. And the next week she sent me a DM and she was like, you should come for breakfast with these girls. And I sat down around the table whilst everyone was introducing themselves and I started bawling because I was so relieved to have found my people.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, community's everything.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So what I'd love to do now is just to dive into some hard and fast rules when it comes to PR. So firstly, what do you think, like, what do we need to have in place before we start even considering PR?
Well, I think it's really important that you've got a great product or service. Like, you know, I know everyone thinks that they do, but I think you really want to have road tested that because that's going to show up quick when you know, get someone writing a review about a product. Because I've sent a computer screen to a tech journalist and they shredded it because they didn't like the product. And, you know, that will happen if you have a product that's not ready for market. So, you know, great ways to tell if you've got a great product is you've got a healthy interest in the product from your clients or from your customers, and that you get really solid reviews and testimonials from the clients that use your product. That's a really nice way to tell whether your product's ready to, you know, have the spotlight shone on it. But some really simple things are, you know, having a robust website because you don't want it to fall over when you get heaps more traffic coming your way. You want to have a really beautiful, engaging brand. So from a design and message perspective, and that your social media is robust, that you've got some really clear messages around who you are, and people can understand that when they jump onto your social media channels.
Awesome. And what would be some realistic goals you should set when it comes to PR?
I'm just going to have to pause for 1 second. Sorry, my son's just got home from school. My dog's like squeaking in the background. He'll just be 1 second. Sorry. Sorry. Maybe just mark down the time that we're at so that it's easy to find in the edit. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Okay, good to go.
So what would be some realistic goals to set when it comes to PR?
Well, I think some really good goals are that you are going to forge meaningful relationships with 3 key journalists, and expect to have built that relationship over a 3-month period. And of that, you're going to expect that you're going to get ideally 3 pieces of coverage.
Okay, awesome. That's really good to think about it from that perspective. What about from the business owner's perspective? Like, would they expect to have goals around like getting a piece of coverage and how that's going to then impact their following or impact their business numbers? Like, what do you think from that perspective?
Yeah, so like this side of publicity is a pretty contentious space. Most publicists will discourage you from, you know, having like a lead number generated off the back of publicity, because publicity's biggest outcome is trust. And that's a really hard thing to measure. It's something that we see transformed over time, and you can generally measure that in conversations with people about how they feel about your brand. Now, unless you're a massive brand and that's where, you know, you're doing big sentiment testing analysis, which most of us are not in the small business landscape, you know, it's pretty tricky to measure that. That being said, I've seen one 5-minute television opportunity generate $20,000-$30,000. But that's generally off the back of, you know, a 3-month campaign where you've been doing email marketing, influencer collaborations, strong social media strategy. So in my eyes, I think that your expectation should be that if you've got a robust multi-channel strategy, then you'll know what to expect if you dial up and you're going to get 20,000 more hits on your site. But in terms of really clear A plus B equals C, there's not really that formula with Publicity.
But I think what you're also getting to there is that it's more of a long-term goal. It's not something that you can expect quick, overnight results from. Like, look at it from a perspective of what's your 3 to 6 month plan of getting PR, and what's the purpose of it, and what are you going to do to generate those types of leads.
Yeah, and it's a thing that gives you longevity and the ability to stand apart from the pack. So, if that's one of your goals, then I would say it's a good one to measure by.
Yeah, awesome. And what would you say would be the best advice to give someone when it comes to creating their pitch? I know that you talk a lot about storytelling and how important that is. Tell us a little bit about what creates a great PR pitch.
The best PR pitches are well researched. So I'll tell you about a pitch that I got into my inbox this morning because I'm the editor for a youth publication. And I got a pitch from a lovely lady who was sending me a pitch about how I could save money this winter through a certain type of heater. A thermo heater, whatever the hell it was. And this is like the third or fourth pitch that I've received from this lady. And, every time I see really bad pitches, I am so tempted to contact their client and let them know what's up. Because for me, the integrity of our industry is being tarnished every time a publicist doesn't do their job properly. So there's a difference between a story not quite being the right fit and someone not even trying. So I write for a youth publication that covers sex, pleasure, culture, and identity, and I'm getting a pitch about saving money on my heating bill. And I responded back to her and I said, our demographic is 16 to 25, and I suspect it's not the right fit for us. And she came back to me and said, well, that's why I included a photo of a student studying, because then you could see that, students want to save on their energy bills too. And I was just like, yep, okay. So, it really... editors and journalists are super busy. So what we want to do is give them no space to have a moment of doubt about the alignment of what we're sending. So a great pitch is as brief as you can possibly make it, because we want to get our story across quickly. But we need to make it really obvious that it's a good fit. So a good pitch addresses the journalist or editor by their first name. Make it really clear. Don't disguise it with a hi lovely. Don't say, dear the editor, or to the title. We're speaking to individuals. So we want this to feel like a love letter. In that first sentence, I really like to build the rapport. This is a love letter and we're forging a relationship with them. So if you tell them something you've read or listened to or heard that they've produced, then they're immediately getting that spike of serotonin and, a spike of oxytocin. They're getting that love bug happening when they're reading what you're writing. So they're immediately going to be so much more receptive, but also you've shown them that you're tuned into them. So you're showing them that there is, halfway there in terms of understanding that it's going to be a good fit. And then I like to include a little bit of a background, a sentence or two of who you are. You don't need to say what your name is, because your email signature will do that for them. But you can say that you're the founder or creator or maker of XYZ, and then say why that's relevant to that outlet's audience. Now you can do a quick Google search of a media kit of an outlet, so you can see exactly who they write for or produce for, so that you can tailor your pitch to them. So if you're writing to a business outlet that specializes in women in technology, then I would be making sure that I'm mentioning that this is something that's of interest to people that identify as women, that are working in the technology space, and that have an interest in business. And I'd be threading that through why this thing is interesting. And then I'd like to always include in a really great pitch a couple of bullet points that list different topic areas or news hooks that might be of interest to the outlet, because sometimes they're super busy, the story's not right for right now, but if you have a list of different ideas that you can comment on, it means that they'll park that email and save it for later. And when the time is right for them, they'll come back to this list and, you know, potentially hit you up and explore one of those topics. So a really great pitch ends with a strong call to action of what it is you want to achieve there. So do you want to do a phone interview? Do you want to invite them for a photo shoot? Have you got high resolution images that you can supply? Would you like to jump on a call? Whatever the thing is you want to do, make it clear. I had one of the junior journalists send me an email earlier this week saying, I don't know what to do with this email, because someone had sent through a pitch that had no clear call to action of what it is the person wanted them to achieve. So always be clear of the ask. Don't try and bury it and hide it or be too shy to ask, because otherwise you're expecting the person is going to know what it is you want to achieve. There's no point putting all the work into building a rapport with someone, doing all of this research, and then but ghosting on the ask. So yeah, that's kind of a pitch 101.
That was so good. And I absolutely agree with what you just said at the end, because I literally had that happen a week or two ago, where I got this email from this guy that has created a comedy club, and he gave me his full life story and I didn't know why. Like, are you wanting to work with me as a coach? Are you wanting to be on my podcast? Are you wanting, like, I have no idea what he was actually asking. I'm just like, honestly, you've got to have the call to action, because you can't read their minds. You've got to literally say to them, this is how you want them to respond.
Totally. And people are busy and they don't want to have to think or imagine what the thing might be that you're saying. And for me, if there's any friction in the email, I know that it's just going to be ignored. Or someone will go, okay, cool, that's interesting, I might have a look at it later. And then that moment's gone. You've lost them to the rest of their to-do list. So I just like to make it as simple as possible.
And I think what you said there too about making sure that it's personalized is really key. Like, the thing was in that email, for instance, was like, it was all about him, and I had absolutely no idea for whatever reason he was reaching out. And yeah, it just made absolutely no sense. It was so funny. And I'm the same. I get podcast requests, interviews, and it's just like, you obviously haven't even looked into what my podcast is about, because it doesn't align at all. So do your research. Otherwise it's just going to get, and you're right, I'm just so busy, I literally don't have time to respond. Like,
yeah. It's a shame, you know. Often I do try and go back to people and explain why that's not a good pitch, and not from, oh, this is not a good pitch, but just saying, you know, our audience is in an alignment, or, you know, maybe you could go over here with this, or maybe you could spell out that, because I do feel like, you know, the best editors and journalists I know always go back, and then there's an opportunity to collaborate and restyle, reshape something, because there might be something you didn't see and that you didn't understand. But if they know what you're looking for, then it suddenly becomes a much more collaborative relationship where you can help one another.
Because I think in this day and age, there is so much need for so much more content, but they're open to it, right? Like, they're open to reading it and finding out whether it is the right fit, because they need to fill pages. They need to make sure that there's good clickbait on their websites. Like, it's so important that I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, don't hesitate to pitch. Like, we're trying to make sure that you have the bare bones of what it is to create a pitch, but please don't be hesitant, because they are going to be open to it if you just personalize it and put a little bit of extra thought into it.
Yeah. And also, don't be afraid to say in a pitch, this is the first time I've sent a pitch. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Would you be open to a 15-minute chat so that I can bounce an idea with you? Or if this isn't the right fit, can you help me understand why? you know, like you might not get an answer, you might not get the response that you're hoping for, but you also might, and you lose absolutely nothing by being super honest.
It's 50-50 chance. So I would love to, just before we finish up, I'd love to know what is some of the best advice that you've ever been given?
Well, Nike kind of nailed it with just do it. I don't know. I mean, my parents probably weren't the most firm with their advice around career and, you know, what to pursue. But what they did always say was do whatever you love and you'll enjoy the rest of your working life. And I remember at the time being so infuriated by that, because I was like, I don't know what I love. Like, and I honestly was walking around waiting for it to drop out of the sky for so long. And it's true. Like when you're in deep alignment with your work and you feel joy in what you do each day, then it's bloody awesome. Like I never begrudge going to work. I haven't for, 15 years or something. Like, I definitely went through a patch of it when I had burnout, but I still loved it. I still found so much joy in the work that I've done. So I think that's really sage wisdom, to find the joy and chase it, but also just do it, experiment, like don't get in your own way, just have a crack at things. And, that advice applies to publicity in that, so many people don't send that pitch, so if you send it, you're way ahead of everyone else. But just to have a crack, like dive into this life. We've only got one.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see the landscape of PR going?
It's a good question. I think, given the fact that Bauer has just closed 8 more titles after already doing away with about 160 jobs, there's definitely a lot of fear and trepidation in the media landscape right now. Journalists are, losing jobs left, right, and center. But we've seen some really interesting innovations. So the New Zealand Women's Weekly titles that were closed by Bauer last year or at the very beginning of this year, all of the, key editors and journalists went out on their own and created a content marketing agency. So I think a lot of the money from the media landscape has gone into publicity and content marketing, but there's lots of emerging niche titles. I think for me, my biggest fear about our industry is that the integrity of journalism is at risk of being trusted. There's lots of misinformation about the phrase fake news. There's real news and there's fake news, which is more about the algorithm and on Facebook and genuine fake news that was created as part of hoaxes to spread misinformation. And then there's the traditional media that may not be documenting things as comprehensively as we might like. But often that phrase of fake news gets applied to the traditional media landscape. And that scares me because it means that people stop trusting and they stop seeking out information, and then they will get caught in the vortex of legit fake news. So for me, I have great hope that storytellers will have curiosity to tell stories, as we have since our early beginnings as humans. I don't think that's going to go away. What I hope that we continue to have is a ethical standard that we uphold within our storytelling, and that we try to strive to, actively seek out and prosecute truth. And I hope that people remain open and curious in how they absorb information, so that it's not just blindly received, but also that it's critically received in a positive way as well, not just squashing things because they don't feel comfortable.
I Totally agree. Totally agree. And so what's next for Odette and Co?
Well, next up is my PR Hack Your Own PR program, which kicks off in August, on the 6th of August. So that's my next 9-week program. The one following kicks off in October. For me, I'm always looking for ways to tighten, refine, and polish my program and keep bringing in new speakers from industry and collaborating with amazing people. I'm also working on my private clients, and also writing and editing for future dreamers. I'm pretty lucky that I work with some insanely clever people that inspire me and delight me. And yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I'll make sure I put all the links in the show notes so people can find out a little bit more about Hack Your PR. But just as an overview, who is it for?
It's for small business owners that are looking to extend their brand visibility beyond social media. So for businesses that have a story to tell, that for businesses that think they might have a story to tell, and it's for people that are really looking for ways to set themselves apart from the pack. They might be in a busy or cluttered environment. I've had anyone from, marketing managers, beauty products, service-based businesses, the full gamut, artists, change makers and activists, a little bit of everything. But the biggest thing is a willingness to put yourself out there and be brave. So if anyone's curious and they're not sure whether they have a story to tell, hit me up on Insta, send me a DM, tell me what you are worried about, what you're thinking about, or feel free to book in a free 15-minute consult on my website.
Beautiful, beautiful. And please don't hesitate. Like, she's totally open to any type of question you've got. And I guarantee you, she's probably heard the question before. We all have fear when putting ourselves out there, and we're all going to have a little bit of the imposter syndrome. And like when I talked with your group last time, is that you've got to come to expect it. It's part of the journey. It's not something that only you has. Everybody has it. And I think that we all just need to work through it to push through that fear and make it happen.
Totally.
So last question, what's some advice that you would have for a business owner that wants to take their success to the next level?
Well, take their success, I think, invest in yourself. Whether that's in publicity, whether it's in working with a business coach, or whether it's in investing in a virtual assistant to take some of the churn away from you. I think if you want to grow and, find success, you have to realize that you've got limited capacity and your skills are only, so much before either time runs out or your knowledge runs out. So doing a really real assessment of what it is you can achieve in a day, in a week, in a month, and looking for ways to level up with great advice. So I think that's kind of the key. It certainly has been for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's excellent advice. And I'm literally in the next stages of that as well myself. So it's like totally on point for me too.
Yes. Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you diving in and sharing all of your insights and all of your advice. It's been so great to hear from you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a treat.